if economic collapse really happens, if the worst scenario happens, yeah, you could really get to a position where the standard of living drops to pre-industrial levels. I mean, that would take a massive decline. It would take a complete philosophical corruption of the culture. But all of that is possible. That is not complete ridiculous science fiction. It is possible. And the fact that we have technology does not preclude that outcome. The outcome is completely dependent on the ideas that people have, on the beliefs people have, on the philosophy that's being held by the culture. I mean, you talk about the decline of Rome, and the assumption is, well, Rome didn't have any technologies. It wasn't a big decline. And to some extent, relative to today, that's true. But relative to the period, Rome was fabulously wealthy. I mean, if you go to Pompeii, which is a very well-preserved kind of antique Roman city, what you find is that they had things like running water in pipes with faucets. They had 3- and 4-story buildings. 400 years after Pompeii, there's no running water anyway. I mean, if you don't live next to a river or next to a canal, you don't have water. Nobody knows how to build a building more than 1 story. That knowledge just disappears from the face of the earth. And this is simple, right? This is not building a microprocessor, which is far more complex. So in Rome, that technology completely disappears. I'll give you another statistic, which I think is fascinating. At the peak of Rome's success, Rome, the city, had a population well over 1 million people. In the Dark Ages, at the worst point in the Dark Ages, Rome had a population of 10,000. It didn't take much to go from 1 million to 10,000. Rome was wiped out. The next city to have 1 million people in it, and a city, I think, is a symbol of civilization. You don't get cities where you don't have civilization. The next city, in the West at least, I'm not sure if this is true about China, but in the West, the next city to have 1 million people is London in the 19th century. So it took about 1,500 years for us to reach a city, in some sense, a level of civilization equivalent to Rome, right? 1,500 years. That's how much we declined and how much we had to climb out of that decline. So I would not dismiss the idea that we could go to a pre-industrial age. You know, you could imagine a nuclear war. Now, or just a complete economic collapse, and over time, the disappearance of technology because knowledge disappears and because wealth has disappeared and because people are dying from famine. Now, I think it's unlikely. I don't think that's a likely scenario, but it is a possible scenario. One of the reasons I think it's unlikely is that knowledge today is disseminated far more widely than it was in Rome. There are hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people around the planet who have this knowledge. It's dissipated across multiple cultures. So if the United States collapses, that knowledge could still be preserved in Asia or in certain parts of Europe. So it would have to be a global collapse of civilization that would make all this knowledge disappear. And again, possible, I think unlikely, but remember the story of Rome. It is not impossible that we experience the same thing here. Let's fight to make sure that that doesn't happen, and it is going to be a fight because, again, this is all dependent on ideas, on the ideas that make technology possible, the ideas of reason and of rationality, of individualism. Reason and individualism, those are the 2 key ideas that are required for civilization to progress.